Fall 1 reports. All right, so as we talk about reports, there's some ODS reports and some report changes we want to emphasize, right? Reports are now always available. The distinction between ODS and snapshot reports are going away. I don't know if we have a name for it, what it is, but they're near real-time reports. Going forward, as you render a report or download a report, it reflects the most recent data available. Now, when we say near real time, if you make a change and then immediately run a report, it may not capture that. That's why it's near real time. So, but if you make a change and you run a report an hour, 2 hours later, we do expect that recent change to be included. As you remember, ODS reports were overnight and snapshot reports required a revision. Like I said, now we're moving to near real-time reports. The as of date defaults to the current day, but it would be adjusted as desired. The ODS reports will update data and be edited in CALPADS throughout the day. And the parameters on a report filters all options. Basically, you're supposed to have updated filters. So those are the changes to the ODS reports. There will be a distinction, right? Your snapshot reports, as Marshall said, is frozen. So that always reflects October 2nd, but the view of your data should be more accurate going forward using whatever the ODS reports are going to be named to. So I don't know how else to describe it. And these are the reports that have been affected. Eventually, we always get sold that all reports are going to be updated, right? I don't want to be a liar, so I won't promise it to you. I'm just telling you what I've been told. It's like I'm gossiping right now. And then for your special education ODS reports, 1618 and 1619, students with a low incidence should be here. Remember that the low incidence are primary disabilities that require intent services. So that means you need specialized staff, you need more money, more funding for these disabilities. And there's 4 or 5 codes. You see them at the bottom: 220, 230, 250, 270, 300. I don't remember the codes offhand, but low incidence are those disabilities that the specialists give very intensive instruction. And then we're going to have report 1619, students with disabilities, low intensity in student list. So this is what it will look like. It's not an accurate representation. I don't think 200, but it will be like 220, 230 in here rather than 240. So it's not a report that should have as many kids. And then with our Fall 1 reports, we like to show the relationships between the aggregate reports, which are this teal color. These are required, Kyron demonstrated that you have to click the report. And then the supporting reports, which provide all the detail, all your ability to reconcile counts are in the detail. And you see many of them say student list. That's a list, name by name for each student. So these are the reports that provide the information. If you're just clicking and certifying these reports and you're not really fine-tooth combing going through these reports, I don't believe you can honestly say your counts are accurate, right? Perhaps you can run reports in your local system and compare them to CALPADS, and you're doing it that way. But you know what they always say, the angels are in the detail, are in supporting reports. And then here, the second page just shows there's additional supporting reports, and then we'll cover 8.1 because 8.1 has 3 different reports. It has your active student enroll list. It's a detail report. A detailed report for those students who's exited, not just dropouts, but any student that's exited, and then those that are dropouts that you've reported. And then these gray ones over here are like the LCFF reports for the counties, the COEs. If you do not work at a county COE, you don't have access, right? These aren't for everyone. These are just for those people who work at the COE that have access to CALPADS. All right, and so when you're looking at your reports, how do we make sense of them? So the best tool to use is the report mapping guides in the user manual. So here's the user manual. Right here on the home screen, you see report mapping guides. You can click view details, or in functionality map, you can go to reports. This is the landing page, but if you want to look directly at a specific report, you go to snapshot reports. We're in fall 1, right? These are all the fall 1 type reports. You see the different categories here. I'm looking at fall 1, and I like to work with 1.1. There's always a description of what's on the report, but what I find more useful is the basic selection criteria information right here. And so this tells you which student should be on the report. Students included, so it's going to look for students who were enrolled on census day, that's the as of date for 1.1, where the enrollment is primary or short-term. So we automatically know that our private school students and our infants are not included on this report because they have to have a primary or a short-term enrollment. So even secondary students enrolled at our district, if they don't have a primary or a short-term enrollment, are not included. It also will tell you that if a student moves around within the district, if more than one qualifying enrollment exists, it will be reported at the student with a primary enrollment. So if you have a student that is also a primary in the short term, because they can overlap, it's going to go with the primary enrollment. So when we always say submit all the files before you look at reports, here's a reason why. The student must have an information record that's wholly on part overlap census date. So what you find is a lot of LEAs complete their SENR submission and want to see that verification, right? I've enrolled all my students. I want to see if my counts match my student information system. So I go look at the enrollment report and it doesn't. Well, until you submit that student information record, it's not going to show up. So remember that. That's one of the reasons why we say complete the submission, resolve errors, then look at the reports. And then here's a description of all the filters that will be on the report. Here's also a further description of age eligibility. So this is all in basic selection criteria, right? So if you have preschool and toddlers, they're not going to be here. And then we have an image of the report. I just clicked it to make it a little bit bigger, right? This is what the report looks like. And we add these red numbers so that you can reference the table below. So let me make this a little wider and a little bigger. And so I like to go to the socioeconomically disadvantaged column 10. As you can see, Longfellow Arts and Technology has 6 students. So if I wanted to have an understanding of what is the criteria for column 10, I would just go down to column 10 and notice how there's several rows. So that means there's multiple conditions. Column 7, column 8, there's a single condition, even column 9, right? So if we look at column 9, students with disabilities. So who's a student with disability? It's a student who has an education plan type, 100, 150, or 200, and an overlapping qualifying enrollment. So it's a student who's enrolled on census day and has a plan record of 100, 150, or 200, right? That's simple enough. For column 10, SED, it's possibly a student who has the parent guardian education level reported. That's that 14. Or it could be a student that has a free lunch or a reduced lunch code, right? It could be a migrant ed student based on the program code, or a homeless student or tribal foster youth. It could be a student that was matched via the CALPADS and DHSS automated matching, and they're foster youth students. Remember, that's not a program we report, that's a matching process. Or another matching process is that they're direct certification. And then notice any student enrolled in juvenile court school on census day is also in this group. So there are several different criterias that will include a student in SED, and that helps us define what SED is and how students are included. And so that's one of the more useful things of the mapping guides. And then you see links. That's what we kind of showed you on that first page. If you click one of these links, you would go to report 1.2. I thought there used to be a description of what it was linked to, but there's glossary references. So if you didn't know what a Title III eligible immigrant was, you go to the glossary reference and it tells you the criteria. So the report mapping guides are very useful tools. They answer many questions. They're a little bit faster than submitting a service ticket, although I'm not trying to discourage you. Sometimes you need us to help you with the report mapping guides, but it's a tool that we use often. And as you become more comfortable and proficient with CalPADS, it will be one for you. All these resources that Kyron pointed to, that I point to, you can't remember everything, but you can remember what resources to use, right? I know if you ask me a question on a report, I'm coming in here to understand what should be expected before I try to answer your question. Or I might just flippantly say, oh, that's ridiculous. What are you talking about? Right? You get an answer like that, you'll never ask me a question again. So we always try to provide the resource and the tool we used to kind of enable everyone going forward. And so here's another view of report 1.1. We just covered it. Again, it's your primary enrollments, your 10s and 30s, and then the different subgroups that we went over earlier. Then report 1.2, when we talk about those supplemental reports, it looks exactly the same as report 1.1. You see the subgroups here, but then you get the student list. And so you can also filter this report by grade level before you run it. And so if you're looking for, like, you identify that you have 25 kindergarten students at Emerson Elementary, you should have 30. You can look and see the 25 that have been reported, and then by process of elimination, you determine who are the 5 that are not included and look at their records. And a lot of times CalPADS will have an error on those 5 missing students, right? And that makes it easy. But if not, maybe you can look and see and their data is incomplete in your SIS, make those corrections, submit the files again, and get those students included on the report. Or you find out maybe they're early TK and you didn't look at that. You were thinking they were TK, but they're younger than what's eligible to be on the reports. And then most recently, there's errors on the report. So then report 1.2 is also a good report in identifying disproportionality for special education in general. What you could do is download report 1.2 in Excel format. We've highlighted PDF, but that's a mistake. It should be on Excel, the little red square. Filter for just those students with disability, right? Once you've downloaded the report, you filter column 16 for yes. Again, when we imported the slide, it seems like the graphic moved over one column. And then filter each individual race ethnicity category. So you'll use the same report multiple times looking at the race ethnicity race categories. And what you want identified is any ethnic group overrepresented as far as being identified, right? So if 40% of your student population is white and 60% of your student with disability population is white, that's an indication of an overrepresentation, right? You would expect, and there is a race ratio in the calculations. I guess it's a historic race ratio. And so This can only be used as an estimation tool. It's not exactly what the state will find. I don't want to mislead anybody. And so Brandy has said, make sure that the person who's doing this is someone familiar with how disproportionality is calculated and reported. So you want to really have your SEDS team doing this, not you, but this is just some guidance for them. Maybe they're not as familiar with the information on the reports, because typically your SEDS team wouldn't be looking at an enrollment report. And then you have report 1.5, which represents 1.1, but it's a breakdown of the enrollment in the different race ethnicity categories. And then it can also be used for identifying disproportionality for special education in general. You don't have to download this report in Excel. You can compare it by having an unfiltered version of the report, meaning you just render the report as is, and compare it to a filtered version where you're only looking at your students with disabilities. And then you want to identify if there's any significant difference in population. Again, if 30% of your student population is Hispanic, and you have 50 or 60% of those students, when you run with if it filtered just for students with disabilities, you'll see that disproportionate increase, right? And that's true of any race, ethnicity, but that's how you would use it looking at the two reports. Also, you could look at historical calculations, right? Run this report and look at how it was reported last year and the year before to see if you're trending the same or if you're not. Because remember, significant disproportionality is over a period of 3 years. Report 1.17, the LCFF report, unduplicated pupil percentage count. So you see your different subgroups that will include a student as FRPM eligible, from free and reduced to direct certification. Those students, if they're in any of these columns, they're included in column 10. If they're in multiple of these columns, right? A student could be foster youth and homeless. A migrant student could be a migrant student and homeless, right? A student could be, homeless and also show up on DC. The student will show up in every bucket that they qualify for. There will be a count for them, but they're only going to be counted once in 10. That's the unduplicated eligible. Then here's a simple count. Column 11 is a simple count of any student that's EL. It's just telling you this student's English language status was EL. Regardless if they're in any of these other buckets, they'll be counted here. Again, this total is if the student appeared in column 11 or column 10 or both. It doesn't matter. This is an unduplicated count. So a student may hit the criteria for LCFF funding in multiple categories. The key here is if they're counted once and only once, they're in column 12. And column 12 represents the number of students that will generate LCFF funding for your LEA. If you find the numbers to be discrepant, you want to use report 1.118, the student list, to identify which students and try to determine, again, process of elimination, which students you expect to be included and are not. Or if you think you've over-reported, you can come here and find students that should not be included. Perhaps students' homeless status should have been updated before Census Day. Remember, they have to be homeless on Census Day for LCFF funding. They can qualify for free reduced lunch and for the entire year. So that could denote the importance. Although you're not required to give homeless students a 181 or 181 record. If a student is homeless from August when school starts until the middle of September, they find permanent housing. Once you put that the student is no longer homeless, they won't be eligible for LCFF. This has to overlap Census Day. And so even though the free lunch is given and they're qualified, that might be a process of what and where you might want to give your homeless students, like this guy here, also a free reduced lunch record. Remember, if you're homeless at any point during the year, you're entitled to free and reduced lunch for the entire school year. Same with foster youth and tribal foster youth. If you are eligible at any period of time for free and reduced lunch, and if you have questions or doubt that, submit a service ticket. We can send you the documentation that states that. Report 1.24, dropouts by subgroup, right? Here are your different subgroups and a count of your dropouts. This report's fairly tricky because it's only those that have a dropout exit code that you've reported. It does not include loss transfer dropouts, those E155 and T160s that don't show up. So you always want to refer back to report 1.14, the state dropout report, to see what the state sees. This is just the dropouts that you're saying, yes, we couldn't find the students. Yes, they left. We expected to have dropped out. So you always have surprise dropouts you have to account for. Report 2.1, Title III, eligible immigrants. It's just a count of those students that are eligible immigrants. This report is 3 through 21. As most reports are TK through 12, you can see here you have preschool here included. And so sometimes you have students in early childhood education programs that we're not tracking for CALPADS, but if they are in a migrant program or they're homeless, you should report them regardless if they're receiving special education or not. Those students will help generate funding for you, right? Those are programs that are 3 through 21. I think migrant ed is that, but I know for certain the homeless and eligible immigrants are 3. Well, homeless is 3 through 18. Eligible immigrants is 3 through 21. Homeless might be 3 through 21 as well. Forgive me. But English language acquisition status. Here's an account of all students in each English language acquisition status as of Census Day. And then you have your English language acquisition status annual comparison, that's Census Day to Census Day. So you have your previous academic year, which went all the way up until the day before Census Day, and then your academic year now. It's July 1 to June 30th. It divides at the academic year. It used to be Census Day to Census Day. I don't want to lie about this. I'll lie about some other things. And then certification report 8.1, A through C. So 8.1A is your profile. These are all the students that were enrolled. And if anybody wants a quick report in your LEA, you could provide this to them. It provides a good detail of the student profile. Of course, the read-only access is much more empowering for your users, but if they don't want that, they just want to report, these different reports can help. And then students with disability education plan by primary disability. This is a student with disability report, 16.12. It's going to list at the top the primary disability. This is the disability type that IDEA has. This is why your student is receiving special education services. Then column 3 will have the different plan types, IEP, IFSP, ISP, and you'll have a count of each different student. Then 1613, student with disability count by federal setting. You have the different federal settings, and then you have, these are program setting codes from the plan file, and then your general education percentage rate. And so notice, we saw separate schools when we were looking at disproportionality, right? That was one of the race ethnicity, identify there was too many or a disproportionate number of a specific race, ethnicity in separate school. And then we saw that one district that had less than 40. So, these are different measurements that could be used for disproportionality. And this is the percentage time their students are in general education participation, less than 40%, 40 to 80%, 80% of the time. And remember, with IDEA, the least restrictive environment is including those students with disabilities with their peers that do not have disabilities as much as possible. So how much of the percentage of the time are they in regular classroom population and how much percent of the time their specific need is being met. And then 1614 is the detail report. So you list the student's name, you have race, ethnicity information, which is key, information about the status from the status file, then the plan info, right? Education plan. And then you get several uses for this. So strategy for identify disproportionality within a specific disability category. You can use 16.14. You must run the report, download it in an Excel format, and filter column 11, that's the race ethnicity, for each individual category. Again, you're going to go race by race by race, filter for African American, then identify the primary disabilities being reported. You can do that for your white students, your Asians, your Filipino students, Native American, whatever the race ethnicity is, and try to see if you notice disproportionality. Again, you can make year-to-year comparisons as well. Only until last year, this report has changed from last year, so it's a little bit different. You don't get that one-to-one comparison for the 3-year history needed, but it's a tool. And so it's a suggestion in which you can use. You can also use it for identifying disproportionality for the more restrictive environments. Again, we saw the separate schools. So again, that same report that you downloaded in Excel, the same report that you've already filtered the race ethnicity category column, instead of column 19, primary disability, you're looking at either program setting code, column 23, that's where you would have identified separate schools for the white students, it was disproportionate, or the general education percentage range, where we saw that the school had their Asian students with disability in general education percentage range under less than 40 high. And again, maybe that's the way the cookie crumbles. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong. If it is that way, at least at early identification, you understand that you may have to set aside 15% of your funds. This is not something we should be doing again, but we want to refer our special education team to these reports and let them know for sure these are the best tools they have, if it's not already a tool available in their student information or special education systems. And then the last two reports for students with disability are 1615 students with disability, student services by primary disability. And then those services again in a student list, and the student list gives more detail. You see each service code, which was on the previous report, but then you get to see the location, the frequency, the duration, those details about the services. And then we have report 1611, which is being retired and replaced with 1617. This is just a screenshot of the annual comparison report. Unfortunately, this is our last training and we haven't yet had an update, but we've told it's coming in fall 1. This is a report used for monitoring. And you're basically comparing your students with disability counts from last year to this year, and you get that difference if there is